Hello, I'm Tom Hicks, Chair of the EAC, back from my grilling on Capitol Hill. That went really well, and we announced that this forum was going on, this access panel was going on, and hopefully some folks turned away from that to watch this. So again, this is the fourth and final panel of the day, focusing on trends and changes in the world of election administration and the impact on language access. The field of election administration is constantly changing. Recent shifts include growing alternatives to traditional precinct-based voting, such as adoption of vote centers and in-person early voting, as well as expanding use of mail and absentee voting. Some election offices even deliver the mail by ballot to all registered voters in their jurisdictions. We have also witnessed a number of technological changes in recent years that are changing the way elections are administered. This includes the rapid expansion of online voter registration, significant changes to how election offices publish polling locations and other voter information online, the use of electronic poll books, and continued changes in the types of voting equipment utilized by election offices. And of course, the 2016 election brought renewed attention to the issue of election technology. This increased focus on cybersecurity in elections is generating new tensions between security and accessibility. This session will look at these changes and others through the lens of language access and explore how to anticipate the needs of language minorities when considering changes to election policy or practice. We are fortunate to have with us today another impressive panel, including key election stakeholders from Arizona to Washington, since there's no Z in the alphabet A to W. Two states which elections have changed significantly in recent years, as well as national experts working on to make voter information more accessible and improve the voting experience for countless Americans. So, my panelists today, Matt Beaton is the elected county auditor for Franklin County, Washington, and has served in that position since 2011. He serves as a board member of the Washington Coalition for Open Government and the Washington State Association of County Auditors Legislative Committee. Under his leadership, his office was recently recognized by the Washington Secretary of State, receiving a statewide award for voter outreach. Travis Lane is the Assistant Director for the Intertribal Council of Arizona. He has served in this role since 2014 and previously worked for the council as a statewide Native Voter Coordinator and its outreach coordinator for the Indians in Medicine program, a program that encourages American Indian youth to pursue careers in health. Maria Bianca is the Director of the Voter Information Project at Democracy Works, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to improving elections for voters and election administrators alike. Maria leads a team of civic technologists working in state and local election offices to make official information about where to vote and what's on the ballot available to voters wherever they search it. Lucy Barefoot graduated from the University of Georgia, go Dogs, with a BA in International Affairs and Spanish in 2010. She recently joined the Office of Secretary of State Election Division in Washington State as a voter outreach and voter education and outreach specialist. She coordinates the voter pamphlet translations in Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. Lucy works tirelessly to keep Spanish glossaries with over 1,625 words in the Spanish translation memory up to date to create consistency in all written materials. She offers outreach support to all 39 counties in Washington State at the same time that facilitates and attends community events. She has recently been employed as a language service and community engagement specialist for King County, the largest county in Washington State, with almost 1.3 registered voters. And last but not least, Whitney Quisenberry is the co-director for the Center for Civic Design. She is proud to be part of the center's work to introduce best practices for election design across the country. The center's work on this plain language version of the California Voter Bill of Rights, usable vote-by-mail envelopes, language access, and voter registration has made it easy for people across the country to vote. Whitney was a founding member of the EAC's Technical Development Guidelines Committee through 2009, where she helped develop national voting system guidelines. As with previous panels, we ask each panelist to give a brief remark, and then we'll shift it to a question and answer period. And with that, I will sit and turn it over to Matt.
Great, thank you. Where am I pointing this thing at? I pushed it too many times. All right. Well, let me start by saying thank you guys very much for involving us in this event. I must say, as the day has gone on with the speakers and the quality of the question and answer, the value proposition for my involvement has shifted in a huge way to me. So I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk about the things we're doing in Franklin County and Washington State. I often say, you know, that we throw one of the best events in town and nobody shows. And it's only their future that's at stake. So to that end, in my experience, both locally and at the state, working with other auditors across the state through the association, you know, everybody is committed to engagement, removing barriers, and informing voters. And so there's been a lot of great stuff. I'll move through my slides here pretty quickly. A lot of the things we do, a lot of other of you folks that are very committed and want people to engage are doing the exact same things. So with that, I'll start. So in Washington State, I feel like we work together to bridge language barriers, as evidenced by Lucy's participating in the same panel as I am. And so in Washington State, we are an all vote-by-mail state, and that happened in 2005. Now, I came to office in 2011, but in 2005 is when we came off the back of, I think, the closest gubernatorial race in the nation's history, and there was plenty of evidence that kind of a populist decision to move to vote-by-mail. There was so much participation. I myself, when I went to the University of Washington, was the first couple times, I believe, early years, I had to drive home 70 miles to vote. And so I would do that, and then I was a permanent absentee, and we went to vote by mail. In 2011, we went all 39 counties went to vote by mail. So the VRA, Section 203, there's 4 qualifying counties in the state of Washington. For our part, we are Franklin County, right in the center there, between Yakima to the west, and then Adams County is to the north of us. And so just a quick background on who the voters we serve. We have about 93,000 voters. We are 53% Hispanic or Latino, and we currently have 34,500 registered voters. Since my time in office, that's moved from the low 20s up to this level. I mean, one of the big things we do, and I guess what I hope you get out of these 8 slides from me is that the same thing for everybody else. It's collaboration improves the experience of all voters, and especially in this case, collaboration helps to bridge language barriers. So the Yakima County has roughly 250,000 people and has 49% Hispanic Latino, and just north of us is Adams County, and that's 63% Latino Hispanic. So one of the things we do is, again, we have a fantastic, Kim Wyman is our Secretary of State, and she was preceded by Mr. Reed, and Sam Reed, and they just work fantastic together. We have our, we work together to develop glossaries and do translations, and it's a team effort, so that's very helpful. We in Franklin County use committees. We have an Elections Hispanic Advisory Committee. We use a Disabilities Advisory Committee, as well as we've developed a bilingual elections program. That was developed by Rosa Fernandez, who made the journey with me, which is great for us to have this kind of exposure to all these other challenges across the nation. she's a Washington certified translator and works closely with everyone in these counties and at the state level. So people ask, and that was asked, I think, in our prep for this, was in a vote-by-mail state, what are some of the resources once a person receives a ballot? And everything we do is bilingual. I mean, everything. And so we do, obviously, we have an online voter's guide in the primary. The Secretary of State sends out a voter's pamphlet. We market the election. When we came in, again, one of the struggles is just turnout and awareness. And so one of the things we do is we created a Vote It, Sign It, Send It campaign, and we run that on both Spanish radio and Spanish TV, as well as the other normal outlets. And so it's a 50-50 split right down the middle, and so we do that. We run voter information night at the library, and then on election day we engage the high school, and we have volunteers that come in to service people. And so in a vote-by-mail state, the ballots they're available 20 days in advance at our office, and then they are, statutorily need to be in the hands of the voters at least 18 days. The voter outreach is one of the things we especially enjoy, and as a lot of you other committed people have figured out, a great place and a fun thing to be involved in is the citizenship ceremonies. And we have an adjacent county, Beaton, that's right across the river, and they participate in those as well. One of the things we really enjoy is engaging our schools. We have 3 high schools, and we're fortunate in this regard because the size of our county is such that we can do these things, and we get into the schools and engage the civics department, as people have talked about. It's really the civics and explaining elections. And one of the things we've done that I haven't heard yet is we've been fortunate enough to have a civics teacher who, Rob Gutierrez, he worked with the local campaigns, and they held a student-driven congressional debate in which they work with the English department and the civics department and developed all the questions, and the students ran the whole thing, and the congressional representatives or candidates have participated twice in that. So it's a fantastic thing. So other than that, we do attend local events, community events, both, whether it's all types of events. And so we try to spread it out equally, as well as we do Spanish election presentations as well. We go on Univision, Rosa does, and explains the upcoming election and uses the public service announcements from both radio and television that are available to us. And so, again, lastly, these are some of the things we've done. The one in the middle with the flag on it, we put those in high school classrooms with QR readers, and we are able to register online. It's a very quick pop, and they teach that as part of the class, so as well as the other advertising that we do. So, again, I really appreciate everything I've learned from all of you, and look forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists. So I'll pass it on to you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to participate to this body. It's really nice to be around people who have that strong passion of voting advocacy, such as myself. I'm Travis Lane with the Intertribal Council of Arizona. I serve as Assistant Director. Navajo and Southern Ute. I'm originally from a community called Coppermine, Arizona, which is 23 miles south of Page, and half of it is there's no paved roads, or I grew up with no access to water or plumbing. And that's I wanted to share that with you because that's the experience of many American Indians in Arizona face as far as being in a rural community. I do have some prepared comments. I want to talk about the creation of our organization, Intertribal Council of Arizona, but first I want to talk about the federal policies which sprung the need to have an ITCA. So when we talk about federal Indian policy, we refer to them in eras. In the 1950s, there was the termination era. That meant that the federal government wanted to terminate the federal-tribal relationship. So they wanted to de-recognize tribes. They also had a relocation policy where they encouraged American Indians to relocate to urban areas, promising a bus, promising a job, and promising housing. And in many of those instances, it was just a bus ticket that was given. Also, in the 1950s, the federal government no longer wanted to have jurisdiction over tribes, so they passed a law called Public Law 280. and that's where states were given jurisdiction over tribal lands. And there's 5 states currently that are Public Law 280 states. These policies are really meant to undermine the tribal sovereignty of tribes and of American Indian people, and it was really important that tribes came together to combat those policies. So that was the formation, the reason why Intertribal Council of Arizona was established. And we still continue to do that type of advocacy, especially around the realm of voting. The era of termination was ended through the passage of the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. In Arizona, there are 22 federally recognized tribes. Each of those tribes are unique in culture and in language and have unique governmental structures. So we're talking about language access and working with tribes. You have to have a strong understanding of what that language and culture is and what their government structure is. But before I discuss language access, I want to express a concern in the manner in which the census is working in tribal communities. Prior to the 2016 language determinations, Arizona had 7 tribal languages covered under Section 203, and 9 of the 15 counties were required to provide language assistance. With the 2016 census determinations, there are now 2 languages covered, with 6 counties being required to provide language assistance. These new determinations were based on the American Community Survey. While I agree that tribal languages are being lost due to, in part, the assimilation policies of the United States, I don't agree that 5 tribes in Arizona lost their language over a course of 5 years that would result in the loss of Section 203 coverage. Added to that, the San Carlos Apache language was added back on as a covered language, which it wasn't included in the 2011 determination. So again, there are many inconsistencies of how of how the census is providing outreach in tribal communities. But despite this language coverage loss, counties should continue to provide language assistance at the request of the tribe. There should be better coordination between the census and tribes to prevent an undercount and to ensure that tribal languages are covered under Section 203. I have to credit the ASU Indian Legal Clinic under the direction of Patty Ferguson Bonney for the following information about whether counties are being compliant under Section 203. Her and her students conducted this study in 2016 and found that 3 counties were in full compliance, 3 counties were in partial compliance, and 3 counties were not in compliance at all. Determination of the compliance include whether the county furnished oral instructions, assistance, or other information relating to registration and voting. When asked why certain counties were not providing language assistance, some comments were made that a certain tribal language is dying or that the tribe had completely assimilated into white society. These comments infer that the county did not work in coordination with the tribe to determine if these statements are accurate. This also demonstrates a troubled relationship between tribes and counties in Arizona and a lack of understanding of American Indians and the respect for tribal sovereignty. Having said that, there are counties that have good working relationships with the county, such as Pima County and the Tohono Nation. Additionally, since many of the tribes in Arizona are located across multiple counties, it would be good for counties to work together to ensure accurate and consistent language translation across counties. For example, a couple of years ago, a marijuana proposition was being considered. For one county, marijuana was translated into Navajo as the smoke that makes you go crazy. For another county, marijuana was translated as a Mexican cigarette. When Governor Napolitano came into office, she required that each agency under her jurisdiction implement a tribal consultation policy. The passage of this policy has greatly improved the state-tribal relationship, and policies such as waivers of sovereign immunity have largely been removed in state and tribal contracts. However, because the Secretary of State is not under the jurisdiction of the governor, the Secretary of State never implemented a tribal consultation policy. As this is an election year for the Secretary of State, advocacy is needed to ensure that we elect a Secretary of State who is supportive of a tribal consultation policy when it comes to voting matters. I was also asked to speak about the voter centers and their impact on voting in tribal communities and language assistance. Arizona is the 6th largest state in the United States. Apache County is considered the longest county in the United States, and I believe Coconino County is one of the largest, if not the largest county in the United States. 5 of the largest tribes are located in Arizona. Their tribes are rural and make transportation a major barrier to voting. As I understand it, a voter center generates a ballot specific to the voter no matter where the voter lives in the county. Since tribal languages are considered unwritten languages, a voter-specific ballot with no language translation wouldn't be helpful to an American Indian. As I understand it, vote centers have been implemented in replace of providing a poll location due to their expense. A vote center may not be helpful to an American Indian because they may not be able to vote due to transportation issues. Perhaps instead we look to Navajo County as a best practice. Navajo County has created super precincts, meaning that they can have consolidated precincts to prevent out-of-precinct voting. I'd like to also make a comment about vote by mail. ITCA does not necessarily endorse vote by mail. We do oppose a statewide vote by mail initiative. Vote by mail does not provide tribal language assistance as required under Section 203, and there are issues with access to the post office. To conclude my comments, greater outreach and coordination must be conducted by the census to prevent an undercount in the tribal language, and that tribal languages are covered under Section 203. Tribes and counties must work together to ensure tribal language assistance is provided accurately and consistently. Consideration should be made about creating super precincts as an alternative to vote centers, and state voting agencies should adopt a tribal consultation policy to ensure proper tribal input is provided regarding voting and tribal language assistance. Thank you.
Maria?
Wonderful. Oops. Oh, that doesn't seem right. Do I need to do something to bring up my slides?
They should.
Okay.
There you go. Nope.
Nope.
Maria.
I can start talking without them while we work on this. I'm Maria Bianchi. I work with the Voting Information Project. I'm the director of VIP at Democracy Works. VIP is the acronym we lovingly use for the Voting Information Project, though I enjoy that that's the acronym we use. Today I'll be talking about the Voting Information Project and particularly the tools that the Voting Information Project provides in a number of languages and the work we did with elections offices across the country to be able to provide those tools. I'll talk about some of the things we learned from the process of creating those tools and some new directions that will be going in 2018 with our voter-facing tools. Democracy Works is a nonpartisan nonprofit. In addition to the Voting Information Project, we have a number of other projects, the most notable of which are TurboVote, a service that provides information about voter registration and help accessing absentee ballots in addition to notifications when you have an upcoming election to more than 3 million voters. We also work on Ballot Scout, which is an application that allows election officials and voters to track absentee ballots through the mail using intelligent mail barcodes. And then the voting information is the newest acquisition of Democracy Works. The Voting Information Project is the newest acquisition of Democracy Works, though we've actually worked on it as the data and technology team for a number of years. VIP is an effort of election officials and the Democracy Works to provide official information about polling locations, who is on the ballot, contact information for election officials, that is official and up to date to voters wherever they are looking for that information across the internet. It was born out of some research that the Pew Charitable Trusts did that showed that people weren't always finding that information in the places that they were looking, primarily in search engines and on social media. So VIP is an effort to take official data from the entities that generate it and put it in those places where it can meet the voters who need it. In 2008, when the project started, there were 8 participating states. Now 46 states and the District of Columbia participate in VIP. The process of VIP is the state works with us to create an export of their data. We work with them to do quality assurance on that data and to make sure that everything is coming through accurately. And then when the state is satisfied with the state of the data, it is published through Google's Civic API. The Civic Information API makes that data available to developers who build tools across the internet that are built on that data. In 2016, the data saw about 123 million impressions across the internet. It was the polling location data that voters found when they searched in Google search results Facebook pushed voters to to find their early vote sites or polling locations through this data. Other organizations are able to build really innovative tools. Rock the Vote built their voter guides using this polling location data. A number of our own TurboVote program uses this polling location data in their text messages. And we also offer a number of free tools to advocacy groups, to community organizations, to campaigns or elections officials, whoever is interested in using those free tools. And the free tools are the piece that I'd really love to talk about today. There are the first of those free tools, and now I wish I had slides because it would be cooler if you could see it. The first of those free tools is the voting information tool. It's a widget that you can drop onto your website. It's a few lines of code, and it allows a voter to input only their address and get back their polling location and, depending on the state, information about their election official and any candidates that might be on the ballot. The tool is customizable, so though the default tool has a certain appearance, elections offices can change the colors, the text on the tool, the logo, so that it matches their own website. And this tool is offered in 17 languages. The tool was, when the tool was first released, we were working with Los Angeles County, who thought that they would like to put the tool on their website, but their website is offered in a number of languages, and they didn't want a tool that would only serve voters who spoke English. And so they donated the initial set of translations for the tool, and we incorporated them into the tool, and then repeated that process with a number of other elections offices. Minnesota elections office, as well as Washington State, were very helpful in adding and sort of adding depth to the number of languages that tool is translated into. And over the years that the tool has been around, we've tweaked that language because we've found through sort of our work with other government entities that there are some phrasing that is a little awkward, or that consensus sort of says is like, maybe that's not the word you should be using. That's what it looks like. Great. So the VIP tool is available in 17 languages. And we've also had to update translations as we added new features. When the tool was initially released, it didn't support representations of drop boxes for states that vote by mail. Users can choose the language that they'd like to view in the tool in using this drop-down menu, which I realize that one of the things we'd like to do in the new tool is make sure that the languages in the drop-down menu are reflected in that language rather than using their English names. This is what the inside of the tool looks like. But we don't rely on the menu alone, though the user can always use that menu to manually change the language. We also look at the browser preference of the user. When a user navigates to the website, their browser communicates an accept language header, and we look at that header to decide what language to initially present the tool in, so that a user who speaks Spanish doesn't actually see the English language version of the tool first. They go right to the Spanish language tool, that they can change it back. We don't have analytics on this tool, but we do on our main site, Get to the Polls. And one of the things we saw was that a pretty significant portion of our traffic was coming from users who had browser preferences that indicated that Spanish was their preferred language, that some variation of Spanish was their preferred language. We also have a text message tool for folks who are don't necessarily have a way of accessing this information through the internet. They can text a shortcode, the shortcode Go Vote, either the word vote or voto, though the tool actually has an initial menu that will allow you to switch the interaction to one of 10 languages. This allows a user to text their address and get back information about their polling location and a little bit of other elections information. And that tool had about 200,000 uses in 2016. The reason that we are able to share translations across jurisdictions is because VIP relies on data that's supplied in a common data format, the VIP specification. And this allows us to share a tool where translations are generated by elections offices that support those languages, but the tool can be shared so that other offices using the tool have these other languages. Even if they don't have populations that meet the threshold for Section 203, you may still have voters who would prefer to get information in those languages. And shared data formats are a way to build frameworks that jurisdictions can easily pass back and forth. The next step for us is actually translating not just the frame for the data, but the data itself. In the new version of the data specification, we've introduced internationalized text so that we can translate objects in the data as well as in the tool. This is particularly important for listings of ballot information where people would really like to be able to see contest names in their preferred language. So we're starting to work with states to incorporate this as well as the framing data of the tool. In 2018, we're releasing a new version of the tool that has been updated to improve user experience and accessibility, but keep the features that people really liked, like customization. This version of the tool will be much easier, friendlier to screen readers. We also are working on using more plain language in the tool. I think that we've reached a place where we're offering a tool that provides a level of comprehension, but we're working towards making the tool comfortable for users who are communicating in languages other than English, making sure that the translations are complete and coherent, that there isn't too much sort of English being dropped in where we can avoid it. And we're looking to continue expanding our partnerships with states in order to build out the translations that were available, and I'd like to not stop at 17 with the new tool. So if you are interested in helping with that or have questions or would like to use the tool, please reach out to me or visit the Voting Information Project's website.
Great, thank you.
I think you just hit it.
You'll see, yep. Make sure they know who.
Okay, I want to thank you, everybody, because I have learned, this is such a great learning experience for me. And I have a lot of information I want to share with you. I have a short video, 30-second video, in the middle. So I really hope to get feedback from that video. And first, I want to thank Matt for giving a lot of information about Washington State. We're a vote by mail state. And currently we have a 7.5 million population. And out of that, 4.3 million registered voters. We have 4 jurisdictions that are under Section 203. And we have 3 languages that we translate the voting materials into. So it's Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese. So my job is to support the county outreach efforts, and also I coordinate the translation part of the measures and initiatives and candidate statements. That would be the statewide positions. And we do have that a voter's pamphlet and for the general. And so the current trends that I would like to address today are My Vote and radio and public service announcements, social media. We have our language assistance plan, which is going to cover a lot of the information about the translation, about the outreach, and accessibility. And then lastly, I will share with you the voter education and outreach events that I have done for the past 3 months. And I would like to highlight a lot of those events because I work in collaboration with the states. So the key word here is collaboration with the counties, I'm sorry. So, My Vote is an online tool that has, we call it the language access tool. It's an online, it has online voter registration, personalized ballot information. It has the voter's guide, ballot drop box locations, and the accessible voting center locations. So it has a lot of information, it's very personalized. So when someone is wants to register by using my Vote.wa.gov, then they will need their state ID or driver license in order to do it online. If they don't have that, they will have to turn in a paper form. And we have the voter registration form in 20 languages, and they're available on our website. And anybody can download them and print them. And we also have the voter registration form in Braille, and we can mail those out if anybody requests that. Next, I would like to talk about the radio. Secretary Wyman's radio spots. We have 4 radio spots that she recorded. She recorded the English version, and we do air those for the primary and general election. It's translated and recorded into Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese by our communications team. It's aired on radio stations across the state. Live radio interviews promoting registration and voting. I've done 2 of those with the Commission of Hispanic Affairs. They had the radio spots, and then I recorded 30-minute segments that were aired, I believe both of them in May. And Univision used one of our Spanish radio spots to create a TV ad airing in Seattle, Yakima, Tri-Cities, and Walla Walla. So the information that we provided, it's been used to create more outreach materials. And this is the video that I want to share with you. This PSA video is created by TVW with the participation of volunteers and the Secretary of State's office. And it was posted on our Facebook Washington State Elections page. Play.
For those of us with disabilities,
It has the CC captioning
be a struggle.
in English,
To have your
Spanish,
voice
and
heard.
it has the capability of,
one of the most
other
important ways
languages.
to be heard is by voting.
I can't do it on
Visit
my
your
end.
county elections department from July 16th through July 20th for Get Out the Disability Vote Week, part of the National Disability Voter Registration Week. Learn how to register to vote, how to mark your ballot online, and how to use an accessible voting unit.
Learn how to participate.
In Washington's political process.
Because in an election, every vote counts.
So this short video was created last year as a pilot, and I found it and I reached out to TVW, and they were able to update it for this year. And then I reached out to the translators from the counties, and I said, I would like to hear your opinions on this video, and this is the translation in Spanish, and let's make it available. So it is in English, Spanish, and it has a choice of auto-translate in many other languages. And I'm sorry we couldn't see it, but it's a great video. And then I'm going to get into our language assistance plan was created in 2011. And it's a 47-page document. It was updated in 2015, and it has 3 very easy steps. Know your community and civic groups and the community you're about to work and do this work for. 2, plan. Plan by doing, again, get your community to buy in, get that community to buy in. Work on the definition. We have the definition of plain language. We're huge on plain language. And 3 is implement. So that means it's the ballot design, the envelope, and then lastly is the outreach, collaborate, the translation and interpretation services. And so we have translation procedures that allow community reviewers to give input on any translation before publication. So for example, the voters pamphlet is translated into 3 languages. I review the Spanish, then I give it to the community reviewer. She gives it back to me. Rosa, thank you very much. And then it's finalized. For the other 2 languages, I receive it from the vendor. We have the initial translation from the vendor, and then it goes to the community reviewers, comes back to me, and now we know that the language that was used by the vendors has been reviewed, and we feel confident about the printing the voters pamphlet, and we put it in our voters guide. Also, in the language assistance plans, we have our Spanish summit meetings, and we started calling it Spanish because we focused in the Spanish glossary and our outreach, but it's the 4 jurisdictions plus the Secretary of State that participate in this meeting, and also the supervisor of the outreach and program in King County, and she also gives the input on the other 2 languages, which is the Chinese and the Vietnamese, or gives that opportunity to talk about the successes and the challenges of voter outreach. And then lastly is my list of the events that I have either participated or collaborated with. And basically what I'm trying to do is to gain the trust in the community. I went to USCIS naturalization ceremonies throughout the state of Washington, Spokane, Yakima, and King County. And then I wanted to be able to support the counties that are going to these events, and if they're not able to go, then I can go. I can volunteer and go, because we don't want to miss out opportunities like that. And we also have, so the Spanish Summit is twice a year, before and after the election. The Disability Advisory Committee is 4 times a year, every quarter, and I work and I guess create those events and help. That helps start the conversation on what's coming up, what can we improve. So it's great collaboration. Thank you.
Well, while the slide's coming up, I'm Whitney Quisenberry from the Center for Civic Design. And we've worked for, individually and as an organization, for about 16, 17 years on trying to understand the voter journey and trying to understand how design of the materials of elections influence that journey. We, I guess, had to learn a lot about elections as we started. When I started on the Technical Guidelines Development Committee, we thought 9 months, we'll get this done, we'll move on to the next thing. And 18 years later, I'm still here. We began to understand issues about, it's not just about the design, it's about a design that can be translated, it's design that's accessible, it's design that's cost effective. And in the past 5 years, we've actually started diving into language assistance. And that's partly because of a project that we started that actually started us as an organization in California. And that was working with across the state on designing better voter guides. We were actually challenged by our partner at the League of Women Voters, who said, if you make it 10% easier for people who already vote to vote, you'll have failed. You have to reach out to people who are not getting the information they need. You have to understand what information they need and how to deliver it to them well. These are not things that these are the 2016 San Francisco voter guide covers. And I put them up here because they show you one of the design principles we came up with. I'm just going to do these pretty quickly because I want to get on to what we've been doing since then. But the first and most important thing is that in every language, you need to signal the other languages that are available. So if somebody picks up something in Chinese, they can see that it's also available in Spanish, in Tagalog, in whatever other, and in English for that matter, in the other languages that are available. Like many counties, San Francisco uses color so that they can very quickly see which stack of voter guides and all other materials are in particular languages. which is a great idea. There's one thing I wish they had done better, which is that I wish they'd matched the colors that the school district uses. So if there's in your county, if there's color codes for language and other things, that's a great opportunity to kind of build on it. So you begin to say, right, orange is my color, right, yellow is my color, and you can find the materials very quickly. The next thing is deciding on a layout, and I have some samples at the back table. This is Santa Cruz's June primary ballot, and one of the easiest counties to work on the layout of their voter guides were the counties that had complete language access, right? Section 203 determinations for 4 or 5 languages, because there was no question. They were going to do them in separate books, right? Or if it's just 2 languages, they could do front and back or top and bottom or interleave the page, whichever one of those solutions they found. But California also has their state determinations, which are done on a partial basis. And so some of your voter guide has to be translated, but not all of it. Your candidate statements, whether it's in language, depends on what the candidates choose to give you. So it makes the translation layout very erratic, and working through that and finding ways to make sure that you not just signal the language is available on the front of the book, but also at each page. So we worked on things like making sure that both languages were at the top of the page, unless you're doing a straight top and bottom throughout the whole book, so that someone getting to a page can see instantly if their language is available in this book on this page. And then trying to be consistent. The language access people at Watsonville said, on the cover it's alternate things, then it's half of a page, then it's alternate pages, then it's a section. Which is it? Get it right so I can tell my constituents how to find their language on the page. We also look for visual indicators, whether that's color or looking for ways to signal which language a section is in. And I think many, many people today have already talked about the importance of plain language, because if you've written in plain language, and we share a mentor, because Ginny Reddish, our mentor, was also worked intensively in Washington. If you have written it in clear English, simple sentences, short sentences, active voice, it translates much better into every other language, especially languages like Chinese that don't have passive voice. Right? So the more convoluted your English language is, the harder it is to translate it clearly. And then something that I think a lot of people forget on printed materials is to mark up your language so that in the source file, so that when it goes online, it's all ready to be handled by the browsers. But this year we've learned something else, which is there's a bigger picture, and that is that designing for language access is a process, not just a translation process, but an entire process throughout the project, starting from the very first moment you think, we're going to do this new thing, all the way until you deliver it. We've talked about glossaries everywhere, but I want to show you an example of what happened in California. They have a new model for elections that's beginning this year called the Voters' Choice Act. And we have seen it translated at least 5 different ways. There's a committee in California working on resolving these issues. But if you're trying to do a statewide coordinated campaign to inform voters about something new that's happening, and you have a statewide determination for Spanish, and you have 5 different ways of naming the law, this is just a recipe for chaos. And so what it says is that at the beginning, when they're beginning to work on the law even, they needed to be thinking about how they were going to translate it so that it worked well in Spanish and all the other languages. Maybe even thinking about line length, because the last one is quite long and means that you're going to distort layout. One that's too short is also a problem. So trying to really make sure that you've done something that both works for your materials, works for the voters, is easily translatable, and maybe plays on cognates. For us as designers, we're not from a community. We sort of work in a lot of different places, thanks to many, many people here we work with. So for us, the connections in the community are not only as vital as they are for an election official, they have to be developed faster. We have been working with California and several other states on new motor voter applications, and that means that we have not just the election office, but the Department of Motor Vehicles to deal with. In California, we went out. The pictures here are a little mixed on the projects, but we were doing testing for the new motor voter application, which is in 9 languages, and which was not tested in language until the very last minute. It's very hard to get into a community. We were particularly worried about trying to make sure that we had reached people who were non-citizens but legal residents and make sure that they understood the translation. Everybody was quite worried about the potential for their putting themselves in jeopardy. That meant that we needed to be able to get into a kind of community. We can't go backwards on this, can we?
Red.
Yeah, here we go. That we needed to be able to get into a kind of community where trust is an absolute must. We were invited into one immigrants' rights center on the condition that no one who worked for the state come in with us. And by the end of it, they decided we were okay, and the entire staff wanted to do the usability test, which was sort of wonderful. But if we have one shot at it, we can't afford to blow it. We were taken out in Orange County by the Orange County Outreach Group to Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish community centers. The picture in the middle, Kathy Fung from Common Cause arranged for us to go to her very multilingual elementary school where we had, the person in the wheelchair is not a participant, she was our Vietnamese translator. So we had a sort of wonderful and diverse mix sitting outside talking to the parents as they came by. And one other thing that happened that we were really proud of, we were going to a library in a Chinese community. We were told it's Thursday morning, not many people come, don't worry about it. We thought, great, we'll have a little practice sessions. We got there, and we'd been talking to all the community organizers we were working with about this and said, send people if you want. And we got there at 10 o'clock, 9:55 before the library opened, to find a gaggle of 30 people waiting at the door for us to work with us. And Kathy leaped into action, figured out who was bilingual. We got everybody who could run a usability test to run a usability test with them, paired everybody up, and in 3 hours worked with everybody who had showed up. Because we felt that people had made the effort to get there. You couldn't tell half the people we weren't going to be able to work with them. I've said all of that. The one thing that they're doing that's quite interesting at the DMV is that they've replaced the paper form entirely with a kiosk-based application. Last week, at the beginning of the week, they actually made that available so you could do it from your own phone, which solves a lot of accessibility and technology things. So we were testing this on a phone with, 82-year-old Chinese-speaking gentleman who said, ooh, I don't know about this. But they had done their work well, and it was simple and clear enough that at the end of it, he said, I think maybe yes. So I thought, great, because if you make the technology simple, you make it easy to use, you put one question on the screen, then there's a chance that people who are not that familiar with the technology can get through it. If you make it complicated and it's even if it's in your own language, some of the concepts may be new, there's no hope at all. So we were really surprised to find something we didn't expect. We were working with official translations. Often the glossaries are critical for us because we're scavenging together a prototype. But we discovered that the translations were inaccurate. In one case, it actually flipped the meaning of the question. In several cases, we were told that the language sounded harsh. I believe what happened was that the translators were told this was an official document. So in languages like Korean that have formal registers, they actually wrote in the most formal register, even though the words they were translating had been carefully written to sound friendly and inviting. And there were places that got cultural reference it wrong. So using ambiguous meaning of cognates, we've heard about residence, where there's at least 4 meanings that could be in Spanish. But the biggest problem was the word citizen. Because in the Spanish community, in the Latino community in California, there's been a lot of work with legal permanent residents to get them to be citizens of the community. You are legal here, be part of the community, be a citizen. But the question, are you a citizen, which is how it's phrased in all the voter registration form, actually produced errors where people were misinterpreting the question. We were told maybe it would be better to say, do you have citizenship? I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this and butcher the language. And the answer was, nice idea, but every other voter registration form we already says it the other way. So one of the solutions we've come up that we haven't been able to, we tested briefly but haven't had consensus on, is that one of the solutions is to say, well, what are the documents you might show to prove citizenship? Because that lets you pack words in, like birth certificate and passport and naturalization certificates, and all of a sudden you've got words that help put context around which meaning of citizen do we have, citizen of the world or legal citizen of the United States. So thinking about all of those ways that you can pack context in, adding information without totally doing localization, because I think with a legal form, you don't want to have the forms drift in each language and have slightly different questions, and yet you still need to be able to address the cultural issues. So just to wrap up, I got the 1 minute nod here. Language is a process. The glossary of terms is critical and needs to be started early. You need to have a way to resolve the issues when there are different dialects, either by choosing one, having public review, whatever those mechanisms might be, so that people who have a feeling about what that word ought to be have a chance to weigh in. We do usability testing of everything we get our hands on, and doing that really early. If you do usability testing with language access at the end, there's almost no chance that you can fix the design. You also have to work not just with bilinguals, but with monolinguals, with engaged voters and with new voters, because both of those two dimensions create huge barriers to understanding the information. And finally, involving community groups. We couldn't possibly do our work without them. We're sometimes the canary in the mine shaft for them on issues that they need to bring forward. So when we started hearing from the voters we were working with that the translations were wrong, that's led to a project of the California Language Access Committee to work on solving those things and create a better process for review. We have tons of resources on our website. Everything we know about design is packed into these 10 little books, and I have a stack of them in the back for anyone who would like them. We have some information on the language work we've been doing, and samples of voter guides and our vote-by-mail envelopes, which, by the way, California, a lot of words required on their vote-by-mail envelopes, and in 2 languages, it was a tight fit. So thank you very much.
I want to thank all our panelists. I think we have time for about 2 or 3 questions. I'm going to start with myself. For any of you who want to answer, what do you view as the key to forging a successful partnership between election officials and outside groups, such as large language communities? Anyone?
I'll put in a pitch for
Okay.
Future of California Elections, which is a 7-year project at this point to do just that. And I think if Astrid was here, and I'll channel the talk I heard her give just last week, it's hard work, and it takes time, and it takes a little bit of alcohol, maybe, or food, good cheer. But building those personal relationships as well as building the professional relationships, so that when you have a problem, you already know the group, right? You already have that relationship, and you can reach out, not in a crisis mode, but,
I think it's also important, and some of our panelists have already talked about the ways that they do this, but to empower those language groups to take the content that the elections administrators, who are the real content experts on how elections are run and how voters need to engage with the process, empowering language groups to take that content and bring it into those communities so that people are able to access that information in the communities they're already part of and where they already have trust is really powerful. So the idea that that Washington is developing videos that Univision is taking and that's, I think, really crucial to developing resources that can be easily shared.
We developed the radio ad, and then a video is created that Univision is gonna air. But yeah, we're very proud, for the work that we have put in. And I think it's really a genuine approach that I really want to help all the voters. Anybody who wants to vote and register to vote, I want to help them. And if there's a language barrier, we're going to work to remove that barrier as hard as we can. And I think by having those the Disability Advisory Committee groups, that help us get a bigger, broader vision of what that community needs. And then we take each community and we do a research to appropriately approach them. We just don't want to show up and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm working for you. No, we want to do it right. And we don't want to miss that one opportunity that we often get. And we want to do the best possible, want to have the best possible outcome from that relationship that we want to start building.
For our part, Franklin County is terribly fortunate, and I was when I came into office, that Rosa had been in working for Franklin County since 2005 and had come over from the school district, is very involved just naturally in the community on serving on different boards and United Way and just out there a lot. So I was super fortunate, but it just goes back to how you build any relationships in anything you're trying to do. And it's just being there and being committed and being real about it. I mean, if they think you're there, if they don't, if they think you just want something from them or need something in the short term, it's not going to work. So.
Yeah, I would think that tribes have relationships with the federal government and state government, both of legacies of discrimination against American Indian people and tribes. They talked about the termination era of the federal policies, but also with the state of Arizona, American Indians weren't allowed to vote until 1948. So when all of our American Indians went to World War I and World War II, came back and were not able to cast a ballot. So there's some real legacy discrimination issues that the federal government, the state government, and the tribes need to work through in order to build that trust that my colleagues are talking about. And that's going to be something that's not going to be fixed overnight, and it does need continued advocacy.
So Travis, I want to follow up on that. What advice would you have for election officials in supporting voters in languages that are just primarily spoken languages? Assistance by phone or oral, it works, but what advice would you give folks who continually vote by mail?
Yeah, and that's where the partnership is really important, because you need to have, on the other side, you need to have tribal governments, American Indian people committed to wanting to want their people access to vote and have to an understanding the ballot, and that can be very challenging with these very legalese propositions and understanding government roles. So there's been a couple of things that have happened up at Navajo that I don't know work or don't work. They used to they put all the Navajos in one room, and they'd play the ballot, translate the ballot. That may not have been the best thing, but it was a good intention to try to do something like that. Coconino County now has their materials translated Navajo. That's available on their website. We have an internet access issue up in many tribal communities, so they can't maybe not be able to access that. So there's things that people have tried over the years. I think just direct language assistance is probably the best thing. We'd have to have continuing conversations about that and what that would look like.
Okay. So Maria and Whitney, Whitney, you said something earlier that reminded me of Hamilton, one shot, basically.
It's reminding you of
One Shot of Hamilton is a song called One Shot. So basically, it's that take that shot. It's basically you have one opportunity.
Yeah.
And so it's what can states do basically, because you have one shot basically looking at a website of redesigning their websites and so forth. What advice would you have for election official offices of covered jurisdictions that are considering redesigning their websites for a broader online audience?
Ooh, first of all, you don't really actually get one shot. First of all, there is always another election, so there's always a moment. But if you start early, then you can test your wireframes, you can test your translations, you can test the navigation around the site. You can be doing small tests as you go through it. When we are lucky, we get to work on a project from the beginning. When we're not lucky, we get called at the end and we go racing off somewhere to try to see if it's going to work just before it launches. But that's the worst time to do it, right? That's when all your budget is almost gone and everything is done. So I think the biggest thing you can do is give yourself more shots.
I think of it more of it's to get someone's attention. That's what I meant by one shot. So.
Oh, okay. So you mean, go ahead.
Bad translation, sorry. That's on
But
me.
if you've done all that work, you'll know if you're going to get their attention.
Well,
And great job with the slides, by the way.
I think that also when you're designing things, starting thinking about language early is, like Whitney said, very important. Because if you don't, then at the end you run into things like English and Spanish take up a different amount of space. And character-based languages also take up a smaller amount of space, but then maybe need to be bigger for people to read them. And if you are learning that weeks before you're launching your website, that can be very difficult to accommodate. So that was a sort of, I think there are things like that, like starting from.
I think I'd add one thing, which is avoid puns, avoid language jokes in your site, although there is one, which is the Louisiana portal, which is Go Vote,
Pointing to
G-A-U-X
Moderator.
Vote. So they've played on their bilingualness in their slogan. But in general, as just general advice for websites, just to avoid playing on English language jokes. They don't always translate, and they don't always translate culturally.
With that, Tammy?
Thank you, Chairman. Tammy Patrick with Democracy Fund Voice, and this is actually the perfect segue to my question, so the timing was great. It's a question for Maria because we were having a conversation a week or so ago, and you were talking about language browser settings, which I didn't understand that was something that not only could someone set on their computer, which of course makes perfect sense, but a website that's being landed upon can read the language browser setting of viewers who are coming to it. And I don't know that there's an election website out there in the country that has it set to read those language preferences and present the material to a voter in their preferred language. So could you talk just a little bit about is that a big problem? Is that something difficult to do? Is it something that any IT person in most offices would be able to set, or how would an elections office go about that?
Sure. So firstly, I am not actually a developer myself, and so take this with a grain of salt. This is a thing that we're implementing and that is not necessarily widely adopted even outside of the election space. There are a number of big companies that do this, Amazon and a number of other sites that will respond to your browser in this way. It's definitely also not a silver bullet. You can't replace the language selection menu with it. You definitely want to make sure that people still have a way of choosing the language themselves and then respecting the setting they've chosen. So with those caveats, because also just a lot of people are not necessarily proactively changing the setting in the browser. And so you want to make sure you have other methods and that you allow users to make that choice for themselves. But your browser always communicates the languages it will accept, and based on your preferences, ranks them sort of in order of preference. So mine say that I will accept English, and then if you don't have English, I'd prefer Spanish. And you can put a parameter into your site that responds to that looks at the headers that the user's browser is communicating, and that serves it. It's not a particularly, depending on the infrastructure you use to build your website, it is not a particularly in-depth thing to implement. And then you want to make sure that it falls back to a language, probably English, in the US context, if you don't support the language they're asking for.
Yeah, there are some platforms that build this in. So WordPress, for instance, if you've enabled language support, will do this automatically for you, which leads to my ending up in some very odd languages sometimes when I'm testing.
Any other questions? Up front here.
Thanks for your presentation. Well, could you tell about voter fraud and voter suppression? And second is, have you heard any successful voter registration for the homeless? And the last one is, what do you think about a petition for election, like mayor or something, probably it's lower level of elections? No, they need a petition. The candidate need to have certain petition of the voters in order to qualify for the election.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit beyond what the scope of this panel is, though.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there are some folks here at the EAC who could talk to you offline about some of those issues as well. Okay. Unless someone wants to try to answer that, whatever. Think that. Nope. All right. Any other questions?
I thought the point about usability testing was really interesting. I'd love to hear, I mean, from a design standpoint, it must be something you do all the time, but I imagine election officials do a bit of that themselves. They might not call it usability testing, but the concept is probably in their head. I'd love to hear from the election officials on this stage and from you, Whitney, about how you go about working with an election office to get that test early on.
So we don't claim science. We claim that we have methods derived from from scientific research, but really, usability testing is nothing more than, in a careful and structured way, putting material in front of people, watching them try to use it, paying attention to what happens, to what they say and what they do, and taking the problem seriously, right? And not saying, oh, it was just one person, because if you have small numbers, right? Elections is a law of big numbers. If you have small numbers of people testing, then you have to take each error seriously. But the hardest part, we think, is getting out of the bubble, right? Is getting into homeless encampments. I mean, I have sat on the ground at Occupy encampments and outside of libraries, which are fabulous places to find people, and also the main office of your county services building.
Anyone else? Otherwise, I have one final
I mean,
question.
I think, you know, other than just the programs that we try to put in place or the things that we try, you know, we watch them and see if they're, you know, if we're getting any kind of a response. So I guess, I mean, to that end, that would be what I would describe as our usability.
So,
I mean, you're going to know if you've made a form with a problem in it, because you're going to face that problem. So you might as well figure it out beforehand by having people try it out.
So I think that, you know, we're almost out of time, but I have one final question, since we are now in 2018 and cybersecurity is basically taking the center stage of elections. And technology is playing a bigger role in elections. How do you see the development of impact on language accessibility with technology? No? Anyone? Anyone?
I think if you're doing good, solid technology, language sits on top of that. So does accessibility. I mean, there's this theory that accessibility and security are somehow in conflict, and they really aren't. And I think language is the same thing.
All right.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate to be a vote-by-mail state, that we can have the paper trail. And My Vote offers that accessibility. You can access the ballot, mark it, print it, mail it. So we still get that hard copy. We still get that. But it's accessible. You can see it's very specialized. You can see your precinct. You can see the offices that are up for election, the initiatives and the measures. And you don't have to see the whole thing on the voter's pamphlet, which sometimes tends to be very big, very big.
And, you know, I guess for my part, when people ask me about it and you hear all the different issues that are out there around election security, it really, I think I find that a lot of the people that approach me, it means something different to each person. I mean, is it the, you know, one person, one vote, or is it they're getting in and, you know, their perceptions? And so I think if we, and I do happen to agree that vote by mail is particularly, the integrity is fantastic, quite frankly, because of the way in which it's conducted. And so, but for me, I think it's, yeah, the way it's dispersed and it's pretty, it's real in the minds of the public, and we need to make sure to find out how to connect with what it is that they think that issue is and try to address that directly. So.
Okay. With that, I think that we are out of time, and I want to thank my panelist, or the panelist here, for a great job. And we're free to go off the side of the stage here.
So wasn't that a great day? Yeah. So I have to tell you, our conversation was so robust that we were trending on Twitter today. So thank you to all of you who participated in this conversation online. That's pretty exciting. I think we were number 2 for quite a while until the president tweeted something. So let me offer our sincere thanks to our partners at Democracy Fund Voice and the Pastor Center, especially Alberto Olivas, Paisley Banzara, Stacy Scholl, Terry Ominis, and Tammy Patrick, who dedicated countless hours to making this event possible. We really appreciate your partnership. EAC staff, including Brian Newby, Brenda Bowser-Sauter, Natalie Longwell, David Kennan, Henry Botchway, Robin Sargent, Simona Jones, Ryan Macias, Jerome Lovato, and Steve Urich, if I'm saying that right. So, and thank you to all of our moderators, our panelists, and other speakers here today. We appreciated their time and commitment and expertise and contributions to today's discussions. And all of our audience members, including those who followed today's discussions online. Twitter, that's pretty good for our elections, right? Let me also invite you all to check out the EAC's website, www.eac.gov, to learn more about our work on language accessibility. As Chairman Hicks mentioned at the beginning of this day, we plan to release a new language accessibility resource early next month that aggregates good practices in the area of language assistance, in the area of, and seeks to help election officials serve their voters with language needs, as well as meet their language requirements under the Voting Rights Act. So stay tuned for this, and we hope that you'll check it out and share it with your networks when we put it out. Lastly, let me say that we want to hear from you. Our mission is to support election officials and voters, and we can't do this without your feedback and input. So please reach out to me, to Chairman Hicks, or the EAC staff if you have ideas about how we can be better, do better in advancing our mission. We're particularly interested in hearing how you'd like us to carry forward our work in the area of language access. This is a priority for us. We know that this is something that's extremely important. As you can tell, we've dedicated a whole day to it. We've done this for 3 years in a row, and we really want to see all the election jurisdictions in the country comply and to actually cover more languages so that we can have better access to the polls. We look forward to hearing from you and continuing our engagement with you on this critical issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alberto.
Thank you so much. I again have to express just how grateful Arizona State University and specifically my office, the Congressman Ed Pastor Center for Politics and Public Service, how grateful we are to be able to participate in this event in partnership with the U.S. Election Assistance Commission and Democracy Fund Voice, whose funding, frankly, made all of this possible. But I have some homework for you, of course, because I'm from an educational institution. So we never just end meetings. We always assign homework. I would challenge all of those of you watching online, those of you that have been participating with us today, to re-examine your partnerships to the extent that you have them with your local higher ed institutions. There's that saying, strike while the iron is hot. If we're talking about how to engage young people and the future next wave of workers to do this important work, the iron has never been hotter than it is right now. I've been involved in higher education, civic engagement work for over 15 years, and I've never seen this level of youth interest in civic engagement that I am seeing today. And it's not, as I said before, not just poli-sci students. I encourage you to look at who your local community colleges are and four-year institutions and see what more you can be doing to partner with them to engage their students. There are activism clubs, there's communication students, grad students looking for research opportunities. You'll find a wealth of resources in the form of students that are available, that know their communities, that know their languages, that are the cultural bridges that you need to do this work. Reach out to them. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised at what new resources come to bear, especially with regards to recruiting poll workers and future election workers. We can't be doing enough right now, and the good news is there's plenty to be done and plenty of new partners ready to work with you. So I hope today has been productive and thought-provoking and challenging. I challenge you to get out of your comfort zone and doing the things you already know how to do well. Ask the important questions, take chances, and reach out to your community partners and cultural institutions as co-creators of strategy with you to help solve challenges and come up with new strategies and solutions. Thank you all for your attention and for taking this work so seriously. I wish you all the best of success. So now I'll turn it over to Democracy Fund Voice. Thank you very much.
I, of course, want to repeat all of the thank yous to the team at EAC, to Arizona State University and your staff for stepping in, and to my colleagues at Democracy Fund Voice. This summit came as an idea through Commissioner McCormick, and it's been realized now for 3 years, and it keeps getting bigger and better, and it couldn't happen with additional partners and additional ideas. The panelists who were here today did an incredible job unpacking a ton of detail and issues that'll be important for the audience here in the room today and those who watched online. I want to offer 3 things to kind of close with. This, as Commissioner McCormick actually mentioned, this summit, it may feel like it's a moment, and we do it one day a year, but I'm so glad to know that it's been utilized by jurisdictions to make a case for funding or to look for partners in the field and borrow those ideas. I don't think there's any strict sort of ownership of these ideas. We like having panelists who want to share knowledge, they want to share information and see it spread. So I would go ahead and just on their behalf say, reach out to us and we'll connect you with panelists if you want to hear more or know more about things that you heard about. The second thing that I want to leave everyone with is I hope everyone has a deep appreciation for a different community than perhaps you feel like you come from. One thing that struck me was Sonia Ashton of Harris County. She said we basically conduct 3 elections, 3 different types of elections. If you have early voting, if you have vote by mail, and then you have in-person voting on election day, the complexity of elections is only increasing. And I, as someone, as an outside observer at times of this huge, the scale of this, I just appreciate so much the work that they do. And conversely, the language needs, the representation we have here from very diverse communities across this country expressing, I love Alberto's framing, not challenges, but unique opportunity to value and cherish some of the things that make our country truly great, which is its diversity, and that includes language diversity. The last thing I want to just remind everyone, and this touches on the point that I just expressed, what remains special about this event and this venue is that there are too many opportunities in the world for us to be adversarial, for us to kind of already have in mind what we want from another person or what we absolutely think that they've misunderstood about us, where we perhaps even want to see them in court. But this has always been a place, as originally designed, was to sort of put down our guard a little bit, to hear one another out, to express both the difficulties and the beauty in the language access needs of our country. So with those 3 things, I want to thank you for being a great audience. I want to thank everyone online for tuning in. And we are, I think, in a great place in this moment to only build a conversation for next year. So the Commissioner is right. Please reach out to us. Let us know the areas that you would like to see in next year's summit. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. And we'll see you next year.